Welcome to Jets Talk. My name's Ryan. I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Boys and girls, I want to go live for a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about yesterday's game, the 53-man roster predictions. I also want to talk a little bit about the defensive line, how they've been working together, even if the stats aren't necessarily reflecting certain aspects of it. And then I want to talk about Mekhi Becton, some comments that were made by Aaron Rodgers, and really just get our thoughts overall on if we are ready going into Week 1, heading in against the Buffalo Bills. So without further ado, let's hop into the first bit of action here. Let's talk a little bit about the quarterback. Are we ready for Week 1? That's the ultimate question that we're going to be asking. And then at the end of this, I'll get into like the 53-man roster predictions and whatnot, because I don't envision that part of this having a very good shelf life. But this part we'll get into. All right, so do we think we're ready for Week 1? A lot of this is going to have to hinge on how we feel about our trenches. The offensive line and the defensive line are two really big areas of potential, I shouldn't say concern, because the D-line is definitely not a concern. The O-line may be more of a concern, but overall, you need to win in the trenches if you want to win against the top teams in this league, and Buffalo is absolutely one of those teams. So how are we feeling about everything as far as that goes? Well, Aaron Rodgers came out and said a little nice tidbit about nice tidbit about Mekhi Becton and his thoughts of how he's developed and what it took to develop him. So I want to hop over to that clip real quick.
It is amazing to see when you empower people, when you encourage people, when you wrap your arms around people. You see the personality start to come out. You see the confidence start to grow. And I think that's what we've tried to do with Mekhi, and make him feel like he's a part of this and make him feel important. And he's returned that love and trust and support with a lot of really good play.
Couple more.
So you've started to see this same type of approach with Zach Wilson. I feel like Zach Wilson and Mekhi Becton, two players that have kind of been more on the outside of things, seemingly since the end of last season. Mekhi Becton maybe a little bit earlier because he hasn't played in the 2 years. But I noticed when I was at training camp, Mekhi Becton seemed to be a little more off to the side, not quite as like one of the guys, if you will. And I feel like the moment we got to see Aaron Rodgers and Mekhi Becton embrace one another on the sideline, Mekhi Becton saying, you know, this is during, I think it was either Hard Knocks or One Jets Drive, where they're talking about like, oh, hey, I want to protect you. And then Rodgers goes, hey, let's have lunch this week, or, you know, sit down and talk. And I feel like that kind of embrace and that sort of, hey, bringing people into the conversation is just so important. And you see this, you know, when I was a camp counselor back a long time ago, and you see a kid that was maybe a little more reserved, maybe a little nervous, shy. I feel like Becton is almost like that shy kid, and it takes someone else to go over and just be like, hey, come on, you're one of us. Like, let's go do this. And I feel like that embrace of Mekhi Becton, along with the play, like credit to Robert Saleh and the rest of this coaching staff for not just handing starting reps to any of these players. Joe Tippmann's a great example of this. He sat as like the third string center for a while, and he's working his way up. Now, I do think he probably waits until about the bye week before he gets into the starting lineup. I think we're going to roll with Connor McGovern, obviously, first, with Aaron Rodgers kind of having a little bit more time with a veteran center at the beginning part of the season. But you see this sort of earn your reps, earn your stripes. We saw it with Sauce last year. He was not the starter until the end of training camp. You saw that with Breece Hall. He came in as like the third running back or something along those lines. And having guys earn it, I feel like is just such a massive, massive benefit to the rest of the roster as well as to themselves. Like if you get handed something, you're just naturally going to think, oh, well, I am that good. I am, you know, worthy of all this stuff, when you don't want it to get to their heads. And I think that's kind of what Aaron Rodgers is kind of getting at here. So I do think the offensive line is definitely ready for Week 1. Now, we don't have Dwayne Brown back at this particular point in time. We're going to have to wait and see just how long it takes him to start. It sounds like Billy Turner is going to be the starter for Week 1 at left tackle, and I'm not going to lie, I don't love that, but if Aaron Rodgers is comfortable with Billy Turner, then far be it from me to say anything else. Rodgers got the ball out incredibly fast yesterday. I thought that was one of the high points that we were able to kind of key in on, because we saw with Zach and with Boyle, they were trying to get the ball out quick. I think the Jets had like the lowest snap to throw time frame of any of the teams in the NFL throughout the preseason. I think it was like 2.3 seconds was the average snap to throw. And Rodgers, seemingly, that first snap where he got it to Garrett Wilson out in the left flat, like instantaneous. Like the ball hit his hands and the ball was already out. Like I've never seen someone diagnose stuff that fast. And it's fun to watch Aaron Rodgers do this. I want to talk a little bit about the. Let me shift this over here. I have my little offensive line. Do you trust the offensive line? So I think this is probably a big area of, I don't know if it's, I guess, concern for the fan base, right? Like this is probably the biggest area for me. And I want to hear from you guys in the chat. Are you comfortable with our starting offensive line as it sits right now going into the season? Do you feel like this is a detriment to our team? Do you think we still have to make a move? Cut down day is on Tuesday. Do you think the Jets are going to wind up bringing in extra bodies at this point in time? Or do you think they make a trade? What do you think ultimately happens with the offensive line? For me, I do think I'm satisfied. Satisfied is probably like a spectrum type term, right? Like satisfied for me is I think this offensive line at worst is league average. I think if you get Dwayne Brown back and players on the line play up to the standard that they should be playing at, like Mekhi Becton should be one of the best tackles in the game because of his size, because of his power. You watch just how he washes down players on a run play. The whole offensive line or defensive line gets wiped out of the picture. AVT is a stud. Joe Tippmann, I think a lot of us have a lot of high hopes for. I think he has shown a lot of good stuff already, and we will see that later on in the season. I don't think we'll see it initially. I think we'll get Connor McGovern. On the left guard, Laken Tomlinson was a stud 2 years ago. I don't know what happened to him last year. Maybe it was compensating for some of Dwayne Brown's injury on the left tackle side of things, but it definitely left a lot of room for improvement for him. I do think there's an outside shot that one of McGovern or Tippmann ends up slotting into that guard position if we find out that winds up being an area of weakness. Like if he continues to play like he did last year. So I would say Laken is my biggest question mark from like a stability of play. Becton, I expect the stability of play as long as he's on the field. So his health is more the concern there. Dwayne Brown, I honestly don't know what to expect. I mean, the guy was absolute trooper last year, but the guy's coming off of surgery. So is he actually going to be up to snuff with the rest of his team, or is it going to take a few weeks to get him up to speed? And now, obviously, 38 years old, your body doesn't heal as fast as it otherwise would. So we'll see. Jets Forever hops in. He says, start Tippmann. Roy says, need bodies for insurance. Max says, the ceiling on the O-line is high, but the floor is also low. I don't know. Yeah, I guess if you start losing bodies, like if you lose Becton and you're forced to start, Max Mitchell on the one side, who's looked a little overwhelmed at times to start this season. We have a lot of interior depth, which is cool. Like Tippmann, McGovern can play a variety of positions. Even Wes Schweitzer, however you say his name. Those three guys can play center, left guard, right guard. So at the very least, you have some flexibility there. The tackles, look, obviously, if you have to move AVT over to a tackle, I think that is your next fallback plan. But I hope we don't have to do that. But I do think that it could be low, maybe. I think positional flexibility gives you a little bit more hope that it could last a little longer. Duncan says the O-line is okay if we keep tight end and running back and fullbacks in to help pick up the blitzes. Yeah, Michael Carter did not do a great job on that one blitz pickup of Isaiah Simmons last night, but that is okay. We'll figure it out. It's just a preseason game. Dude's a little juiced from getting moved into a new city. We'll see. We'll have Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook back shortly, so hopefully they can pick up a little bit more of that blitz pickup. But yeah, I tend to agree. If you have a tight end, I think we're going to see a lot of heavy sets, especially with Corey Davis no longer in the fold. You're going to see Lazard, Garrett Wilson, and I would say Randall Cobb. Like, as much as I want to see McCole Hardman as the slot guy, like, consistently, it feels like at the beginning of the season, you're going to see Cobb as the starter, at least until everyone else kind of gets up to speed and Rodgers feels he can trust those players. Because McCole Hardman's had a few drops that I'm not, like, super crazy about, and Cobb's been a little more reliable. So if Rodgers thinks he can get him the ball more consistently, you'll see that. But I do think we'll see a lot of tight ends. We saw tight ends throughout training camp. I mean, Conklin and Uzama were used frequently. I'm excited to see what that means for Jeremy Ruckert, too. Mitch says, just keep Rodgers upright for 67%. Yeah, I think he could definitely have a really high completion percentage. It's going to be really, really nice. Really nice. Jets forever getting excited. Becton's a superstar, best offensive lineman in the league. Fingers crossed. Akiva says Laken Tomlinson needs to step up. I do tend to agree. Anthony Brown says they will gel once week 1 is over with. I think it's going to take a little bit longer. It might take like 3-4 weeks for the O-line to really feel comfortable, because remember, we didn't have AVT or Becton working with the ones for a long time. So I think the left-hand side of the line might be a little bit more gelled than the right, but at least the right has the insane athletic upside of Becton and AVT to kind of compensate for some of that sort of stuff. Steph says Timmon may project to be better at guard. Yeah, I do think there's something to that. His shotgun snaps were not really great. They were kind of all over the place, and I think that's part of why Rodgers may want McGovern in that role. And also his size. There's got to be something to that. There's a reason why centers aren't normally, was he 6'6", or he's just an enormous dude. So we'll see how that all kind of plays out. All right. So now let's hop over to the defensive line side of things. I want to know, is this defensive line the best defensive line in the league? And I have a play here from last night that really stood out as far as it wasn't a wow. So Jermaine Johnson got a sack, and it's great that he got a sack. I think he's going to be one of the biggest studs on this defense that has the biggest leap up in production from last year to this year. I'm really high on Jermaine Johnson this season. But there was a play last night where Johnson got a sack, and it was like almost an entire D-line effort to make that sack happen. And there's one player in particular, John Franklin Myers, is absolutely awesome. Now, again, backups, but this is the silent stuff that happens that doesn't show up on the stat sheet for someone like John Franklin Myers. So I want to hop over to this. This is absolutely going to be a force that teams are going to have to reckon with this year. So as you watch this play unfold, let me see if I can shrink this down. All right. So obviously Jermaine Johnson gets the sack. We're going to see in the replay portion of it right here. Now keep an eye. You got Jermaine Johnson on the left-hand side. You've got Quinnen, and then you got JFM, and then you have Huff on the far right. Huff's probably the one person that doesn't really do a whole lot right now, but obviously they're keeping some guys in to maybe appear like they're going to give a little more pressure to someone who's screaming off the edge in Huff. But watch what Quinnen Williams and John Franklin Myers do in the middle of this screen. John Franklin Myers is going to take the right guard and push him into the center and the left guard. He's going to eliminate 3 players out of this play, and Quinnen's going to wrap around behind him. And then Tyrod Taylor's forced to step up, and you're going to see Jermaine Johnson clean up the sack. So watch this. John Franklin Myers starts running inside. Those 3 guys are out of the play. Left guard, right guard, center. And at the last second, the right guard's thinking, oh no, it's a stunt. Here comes Quinnen. I have to try and stop this man with not the best position. Look, he's completely sideways. Quinnen's like, I've got this guy beat. And now Tyrod sees it. He's like, oh no, I got to get out of here. And Jermaine Johnson, with those long arms, snatches his shoulder, rips him down to the ground. But none of this is possible without John Franklin Myers crashing down on this offensive line and opening up a massive hole for Quinnen Williams. So while we are always hyped up about the guy that gets the sack, and we're always hyped up about, obviously Quinnen and Jermaine and Huff and all those guys, John Franklin Myers, to his credit, created this play. I feel like he kind of goes underappreciated a lot after signing that big contract that he got. A lot of players, a lot of fans, I've heard in my comment section, oh, we signed him and all of a sudden he doesn't show up because he's not flashing on the stat sheet. And it's totally different. It's almost like, offensive line, if you don't hear the guy's name called during the broadcast, they're doing a good job. Defensive line doesn't generally work that way. If you're hearing their name, they're obviously making some noise. But John Franklin Myers is creating plays for other guys. And you're going to see that consistently throughout the tape. And I think it's going to be really, really fascinating to see as it unfolds, just how the Jets deploy each one of these lines. Do they have a consistent 4 that they like playing together? Because I do feel Jermaine Johnson has earned starting reps. Jermaine Johnson and Huff are probably going to be our starters until Carl Lawson comes back. I've heard like some not so great rumors on like message boards and stuff that have no validity to them, but like people think they know stuff, and you know, this guy knows some other dude or whatever, where they think maybe Lawson could be out a little bit more time. I'm hoping that's not the case and he makes the 53-man roster, because if they hit him with the IR right now, Lawson's done for the season. And I don't think that's how they're going to do it, because the Jets are going to hope they're going a little bit further. And even if you have to sacrifice maybe a lower end player to even get Lawson, let's say it's at the tail end of the season, I think that might be worth it as well. But we're so deep across the board. You're just holding on to some really good players. And we'll get into the 53-man roster in just a little bit on where I think this all shakes out. But overall, I think this defensive line could absolutely be the best in the league. And I think it's the deepest in the league. That might be the better term here. You can have like the 49ers and the Eagles, both really, really flashy lines. But I think the Jets, what you're going to see, those two teams were able to score points last year in the 49ers and the Eagles. The Jets weren't able to score points. That means we were playing from behind, which means we were not sending our pass rushers. We were not taking advantage of the pressure being put on a quarterback to try and generate turnovers. You saw that early in the season, a little bit more by way of like backup quarterback and things of that nature. When you knock out Teddy Bridgewater, you're playing against Kenny Pickett for the first time, like those types of roles. But this time, because the Jets will score points on the offensive side, you're going to allow your defensive line and your corners to kind of feast on some of these opportunity type plays. Gohan says Lawson has been out because he had an injury. Yeah, he's got a back injury right now. Jason seems to agree with me. He says JJ should roll with the first unit. I completely agree. Chuck saying we have 2 starting defensive lines. Yeah, I would argue our top 2 defensive lines, 8 players deep, could start for the majority of the league's teams. And then even our third string guys, there's going to be some good players that wind up like getting cut, and other teams are going to pick him up. Tanzel Smart is one that I'm like kind of concerned we're not going to be able to bring back, because I would like to have him. Elon says Eagles, Niners, Jets 1, 2, 3 on D-line. By the way, wouldn't be shocked if Lawson starts the season on the PUP list. Want Jermaine Johnson, Huff, McDonald to wreak havoc on Allen week 1. So Elon seems to be in agreement with me that Lawson appears to not be coming back right away. But I would say, yeah, Eagles, Niners, Jets. Those are probably the 3 that you kind of talk about there. Hey, New York Bully. What's up, dude? Thank you so much for the super chat. He says, I'm crazy impressed with our defensive line. I know Hardman is okay after his injury, but after that scare, I would like to see us bring in a wide receiver vet for depth and insurance. Overall, our team is solid. So the part I kind of keep coming back to with the wide receivers, and I do agree. I think outside of Garrett Wilson, Lazard, and like the Cobb Hardman situation, like a lot of hope and promise. Like you're thinking maybe a Gibson or a Brownlee, maybe Malik Taylor, like those guys might hang around on the back end part of the roster. But losing Corey Davis was such a big blow to our depth. And the way I'm kind of trying to envision it is, what is our starting offense going to look like? If we're going to run a lot of tight end sets, which it appears we're going to. It seems like we're going to run heavy, and we're going to try and rely on Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook. You don't bring in Dalvin Cook as a $7 million backup if you're not going to utilize the running back position a lot. So my thought process there is, if we're going to be running the ball a lot, and you're going to be using the tight ends a lot, you're not going to need the wide receivers quite as much from like a target share perspective. Like, now, if you lose one of your top wide receivers, now you're in a world of hurt. That's not good. You cannot lose Garrett Wilson. If there's like 3 players you can't afford to lose, it's like Quinnen Williams, Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson. Those are probably the 3. And then you like Sauce would be the other. Like those 4 would be, if you could guarantee health, that'd be what it would be. But health-wise, could you bring in another wide receiver? You could. I'm curious to see who gets cut from other teams. Or could maybe Hollywood Brown become available from the Cardinals? They're having a fire sale over there. Is that something the Jets might want to bring in? I don't know. What would it cost? But I am impressed with our D-line. And I am impressed with the way the offense looked overall, without our top 2 running backs in there. Like, let's not forget, like, people are poo-pooing the whole Michael Carter getting blown up by Isaiah Simmons and Rodgers running around. And it's a bad look when Rodgers is like falling down, flicking the ball sideways. I get that. But you're also going up against a former top 10 pick in Isaiah Simmons. So, like, on the offensive side of things, whatever. But wide receiver depth, look, I'm keeping an eye on it for sure, because I think it could become an area of concern. I'm not quite there yet, though. Radimus Prime says, I was impressed with how much chemistry Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson have. Yeah, it's like scary good already. Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson have clicked so much faster than I would have expected. I was kind of planning on seeing Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb and Malik Taylor through the first part of the season, but like we force-fed Garrett Wilson the ball. Aaron Rodgers trusts Garrett Wilson to get open, and he trusts him to make a catch. That catch that he plucked the ball, like Rodgers kind of, like it was a beautiful throw, and there's no way that corner was going to be able to turn around. Credit Garrett Wilson for not like putting his hands up or doing anything too quickly to key in on the defender there that he should throw his hands up. But Garrett Wilson plucked that ball right from over top of the head. That's a high point, like let me get the ball as far as my arms will reach out from my body and pull it in. This kid's going to be so special. He's the best wide receiver that the Jets have drafted since I've been alive, and that's going back to like Keyshawn Johnson and all that. Like Garrett Wilson's him. Garrett Wilson's a dude. But yes, very, very excited for him. All right, so moving on from the defensive line play, I want to talk a little bit about our final 53-man roster and some thoughts that you guys might have as far as who makes the roster, who doesn't make the roster. I put together a whole thing, so I'll throw it up on the screen in just a little bit. Nah, screw it, just a little bit. I'll throw it up right now. Make the whole thing, and I wind up not using it. All right, so here's where I think our 53-man roster is going to shake out. And you guys can let me know in the comments how you feel about these particular players, who they make and who they don't. I'll go through it position by position. So starting off with quarterback, obviously you got Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson. Neither one of those guys are they're obviously making the roster. But then you have Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle, quarterback 3. The NFL instituted a rule where where the third quarterback doesn't have to count towards your 51-player active roster, game day roster. So you have a 53-man roster, but only 51 are active on game day. So that's where that comes in. Tim Boyle does count towards the 53-man roster if he's on the roster, but he doesn't count. He would be like the 52nd guy in terms of active roster play in the emergency situation where you needed to have another quarterback. So that stems from the 49ers where they had to put a wide receiver in as quarterback in the playoffs, and the NFL wants to try and avoid that. Well, for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, we're predicting him to play every single game this season, and if you have to, worst case scenario, throw Zach in, you throw Zach in. If you have to dig deeper than that, within the confines of a game, you're probably in a world of hurt anyway. You're probably just going to be leaning on running the ball regardless. Now, as far as Tim Boyle goes, I don't think there's teams out there knocking down the door for Tim Boyle. I think you're going to be able to sign him after week 1, and you can stash one of these other players on the IR as far as, not the long-term IR, short-term IR. So let's say, for example, let's see, Carter Warren or someone like that is kind of dinged up and they don't want to obviously cut him. If you were to IR him now, he's out for the season. If you wait until after cutdown day, then you can IR him. Someone like, Carl Lawson. Maybe Carl Lawson isn't starting and he's on the short-term IR. Then you can bring back someone like a Boyle and it's not going to, affect you, but without losing your guy for the full season. As far as running backs go, this is where things kind of get interesting. And I'm hoping that Bam Knight can make it to the practice squad because I do think he provides a little bit more in terms of the pass blocking side of things. Like if you could flip, I don't know. I really like Michael Carter from a leadership perspective, but the addition of Dalvin Cook and the coming back of Breece Hall kind of like makes him only here for personality purposes. You got to pick up those blitzes, dude. Going to make yourself a little more valuable. But Nick Bawden, we haven't seen the fullback quite so much the last 2 weeks. And I think for me that Bawden could be one of those guys that doesn't make the roster, and then maybe you swap him out for like a Tim Boyle, and Tim Boyle's the third quarterback. So that's where those two players kind of come in. Bam Knight, I think, can make it to our practice squad. There's going to be 1,200 or 1,300 players cut in the next 3 days. So these guys are not going to all be like Bam's not getting plucked automatically. Like there's going to be a lot of running backs cut around the league, and I think other teams are going to try and keep the guys that they had in camp in their own sort of situation. Wide receivers, I have us keeping 6. And I think it's obvious the top four there, Garrett Wilson, Lazard, Cobb, and Hardman are a lock. Outside of that, I do think Malik Taylor, Rodgers has some sort of report. They used him a lot in training camp on some deep routes. I think they are going to try and hold on to him. And Xavier Gibson had a great shifty performance yesterday. Aaron Rodgers chirped him out. I think he's definitely going to make the roster. And then you're kind of down to like Irvin Charles and Brownlee. I've kind of cooled off on Brownlee a little bit. He doesn't get as much separation as I would like to see. He seems kind of slow, but he does have some great hands. So it is fun to watch him play. So I'm hoping we can kind of stash Charles and Brownlee on that practice squad. Going over the tight ends, you might notice Kenny Yeboah is not on this list. Unfortunately, I think the high upside of Zach Kuntz is going to be what we try to stash on the practice squad. Tyler Conklin, Uzama, I think both those guys are going to get a lot of looks. Conklin, more of the receiver than I think Uzama probably is, so I penciled him in as the starter, but you're going to see those guys probably equal share amount of snaps. Jeremy Ruckert, I'm hoping can overtake one of Conklin or Uzama by the end of the season. I love what we're getting out of Jeremy Ruckert so far. Tackle-wise, Dwayne Brown, Mekhi Becton. I probably should have flipped it because Dwayne Brown technically not starting. Right now it's going to wind up being Billy Turner, but that's okay because Dwayne Brown will eventually be back. And then you have Max Mitchell and Carter Warren, who we draft this year. Greg Sinnett, stash him on the practice squad. Guard-wise, AVT, Laken Tomlinson, Wes, who can play all the different positions between guard and center. I think they're definitely going to try and hold on to him. That's a good depth piece. And then Connor McGovern and Joe Tippmann. I do think McGovern starts. Tippmann will be the backup until the bye week. I think the bye week's the middle of October, end of October. It's either just before the Giant game or just after the Giant game. I think that's when you'll see him swap in. We'll have 2 weeks to work with the starters. Now, those two guys can also play guard. So in the event Laken Tomlinson's not playing well, you get to move this over. On the defensive side, I have us keeping 5 edge rushers. I guess you could call it 6 if you want to include Michael Clemens in there. I do think Carl Lawson will eventually be put on the PUP list or some sort of short-term IR after this, so I don't think he's going to start this season. Carl Lawson will. Jermaine Johnson, going to be a starter for us this year. John Franklin Myers, Bryce Huff, Will McDonald, and then, like I said, Michael Clemens. And then I have Deslin making the practice squad. On the interior, Quinnen Williams and Al Woods, I think, are going to be our starting 2 defensive tackles, but it's kind of like a who's fresher because Jefferson has absolutely performed really well. I think Jefferson and Solomon Thomas, like, no joke, our top 2 defensive lines are just so studly compared to like any other team in the league. Michael Clemens, I wish we got to see a little bit more from him. Like, coming into camp with the baseball bat, with the barbed wire, he was feeling himself a little bit. And I would have liked to see a little more noise out of Michael Clemens. We didn't see a crazy ton from him last preseason either. Once games started going, then he kind of flipped it into another gear, and you saw the block punt. I think he had a block field goal in there too. So I think that will come back around, and we'll still be excited for Clemens here. Tanzel Smart, I would like to see him make the practice squad. Got a little soft spot for Tanzel Smart after watching him with the Carcucci board and the family aspect of things. I think it'd be really neat to see him make the roster in some kind of capacity, even if it's not the 53. Linebacker-wise, I got C.J. Mosley, Quincy Williams, Jamian Sherwood, Zaire Barnes, and Chaz Surratt. So Chaz Surratt's someone that might go down to the practice squad, but it seems like Robert Saleh really likes him. And Zaire Barnes has grown incredibly well. Like, from like an impressed perspective as far as all our draft picks are concerned. Like, of course, I really like what we're getting out of Will McDonald to start. I really like Joe Tippmann right now. I would say Zaire Barnes is my favorite of the draft picks right now. Like, he is showing out so much better than I not that I like doubted the guy, but I just didn't like expect him to have the impact that he's having. And he's fast. He is a quick dude. I think our linebackers have sneakily become I don't want to call it a factory, but I think I'm feeling less concerned rolling into the season at linebacker than I thought I was going to feel. I thought we were going to see basically C.J. Mosley, Quincy Williams, and then maybe Sherwood starts to help out a little bit. But I like the depth at the linebacker position right now. Outside corner, I got Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Bryce Hall, and Jimmy Moreland. This is because you don't see Brandon Eccles on here because he's suspended for week 1, so he actually doesn't count towards the 53-man roster, to my understanding, so we don't even have to worry about that. As far as Jarek Bernard-Converse, corner, safety, whatever, I do think we're going to IR him. I think he's going to wind up being like a back, back burner kind of guy, like a red shirt year for him. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot from him. Bryce Hall, I'm not crazy about. Bryce Hall, I could see being cut. I think he's like a $3 million cap hit savings if you wind up moving on from him, and I don't feel like he's necessarily earned his position. If you can swing Bryce Hall for a player or a pick, I would probably be a little more apt to do that. But maybe you wait. Maybe he's more of a trade chip a little bit later into the season. I don't know. I don't think he showed out enough to really. I don't know what he could get you in a trade. Michael Carter I have as our only slot. Now, I think they were using Trey Dean in that same role as well. And Justin Hardy, I think, in a pinch could come in and cause some damage. I know they do like Ashton Davis. I've actually been very happy with Ashton Davis for this season. Like the preseason, I thought he's made a lot of impact plays. He had another play last night where he hit the running back short of the goal line and stopped them. Now, they obviously scored on the next play, but really like what we're getting out of Ashton Davis when compared to like where I thought he was going to be. Like I thought he was an easy cut at one point. Safety wise, love me some Tony Adams. I think Whitehead's going to bounce back. Greenbean was talking about this the other day on how playing your second year in a defense kind of sees another leap up in production. I think we're going to see that from Jermaine Johnson. I think we're going to see that from Jordan Whitehead. Jordan Whitehead had an issue with wrapping up players last year, and you could see the talent was there. So I am expecting big things from him. Like if I have to look across our starting defensive players, or roughly starting, I think Jermaine Johnson and Jordan Whitehead are the two players that are going to take the biggest leap. Tony Adams, obviously there's a lot of hype around him, so I guess you could pencil him in as well as like if he's starting and he's playing really well at free safety, could kind of look the same way. And then as far as kicker, punter, long snapper, those are kind of penciled in. Overall, very happy with where I think this team could be. And now this is only 9 of the 14 practice squad slots. There's going to be some other slots that you could throw in there. It could be some players that the Jets pick up after cut down day. I'm fascinated to see which of our good players, primarily on the defensive line and maybe even wide receiver, I guess running back would probably be the other one, who gets picked up by another team. Bam Knight to Miami just feels like it could definitely happen, like a little bit of a big FU, like, hey, Bam Knight's going to be motivated to go against the Jets after bringing in Dalvin Cook. Dolphins fans are like, oh, we don't have to get a $7 million Dalvin Cook. We're going to add, Bam Knight for pennies on the dollar, and he'll go against the Jets, and that's what's going to happen. Like that, for some reason, that's like what's ingrained into my head. Alternatively, and I see Max in there, Dean gets claimed if we cut him, says Max. And I do think there is a fear for that because we gave him the highest signing bonus of any of the undrafted free agents, and I think that's for a reason. Other teams clearly wanted to try and get him. So if you wanted to try and swap him out for like a Chaz Surratt or someone you think you might be able to hide, like Nick Bawden, realistically, you could probably cut him, and not many teams are using a fullback right now, so you may not have to rely on fullback as one of your 53-man roster spots. But I do think that the Jets do want to bring Bawden back at some point. And if they think they can keep Trey Dean and bring back Bawden at some other point after they IR some guys, I think that's entirely possible as well. So I want to hear from you guys. I want to go through the chat a little bit and see how you're feeling as far as this 53-man roster goes. So let's see. So Gohan Angered says, yeah, Dean, I don't see staying on the practice squad. And like I mentioned, I think we will use a 3 safety nickel because of one of the cornerbacks being suspended. Yeah, I do think you're going to see Amos and Ashton Davis used in that same like nickel type role. Be like an extra linebacker almost, even though it's meant for coverage. But they're fast enough. You get what I'm saying. Jason W. says, every time I see Rucker get the ball, I hold my breath because I think he's going to get injured. Yeah, I don't want to see him get hurt. I really don't want to see that. Sikio, are we convinced Lakin will be better than last year? I think he's got to be. I'm not convinced, though. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not the starter at left guard at some point throughout the season. Like, if they move Tippmann over there just because McGovern's like a little more comfortable at snapping the ball, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I just want to see the best 5 offensive linemen in front. Scott V says, I wonder what the hell is going on with Carl Lawson. Yeah, it definitely seems like there's a little bit more to that back injury than we've been hearing. Akiva says, Al Woods is a need for run stopping. Yeah, I think him and Quinnen to play first down makes the most sense because Quinnen can really get after it. He can do everything. And then Al Woods will be a little bit more of that run stopping presence. And then Jefferson's going to sub in for those guys with Solomon Thomas, I think. Jets Forever says, Carter Warren going to IR with Bernard Converse. I could definitely see that. That would free up another spot for the Jets to hold on to Trey Dean on the active roster. I think that makes a ton of sense. Jason says, I'm not sure if making Clemens put on weight was a good idea. I feel like he hasn't been making much plays during training camp. Yeah, he seems sluggish right now. I'm not sure how to feel about Clemens at this particular point in time, but it's still early in the season. So hopefully that kind of works itself out. Elon Avita says, more confident in Barnes than Sherwood. Thought Sherwood would step up. He's very underwhelming at linebacker 3. Well, I think having Barnes potentially earn that role is fine too. I think we're going to see a lot of 2 linebacker sets where it's CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams, and then you're going to have an extra safety or corner out there and try to take advantage of some of these errant throws, especially if the Jets are leading in games and you're not worrying about the run quite so much. That could help. I think you'll see him earlier in games. Jets Forever says, Tanzel getting picked up by another team. They gave him that exposure on Hard Knocks for a reason. There's no room for him here, but he can play for 31 other teams. I do agree. I think the Jets are, I think with Salah in particular, and even Douglas, like realistically, the way the Jets have handled players' personalities and like kind of building them up, like Salah has come out and said, like, I want you guys to earn big contracts because that means you're playing well and you're doing well for yourself. Like, I want you to do well as a head coach. Salah's not the money guy. Douglas is. He's got to worry about that. That's the best part about like the division of powers, because you could always kind of pit one against the. Not, I don't want to say pit one against the other, but you could say like, oh yeah, I want you to get paid. I want you to get paid. So that way you're at least hearing that voice within the locker room. And I think Tanzel Smart's one of those guys. If he doesn't make the practice squad, I do think he's going to get snatched up by another player, by another team. Stephen Ingle says Bryce Hall is trash. He ain't making it. I think he's going to make it while Eccles is suspended. I do think he could wind up getting cut. And I think it would make more sense to save his cap hit than to keep him on the roster. And Alon says, yeah, $2.75 million cap savings if Bryce Hall's cut. Eddie says Bryce Hall went from potentially very good to getting sauced. Yeah, remember when we thought that Hall was going to be one of our starters, and then we went out and got DJ Reed and drafted Sauce Gardner in the top 5 of last year's draft? Thank God that happened. That is absolutely game-changing for this defense and this fan base. GVH says it's another contract year for Whitehead, so as well, so it benefits him to do well, but also maybe impacts who we keep in the safety room. Yeah, I mean, if they think Whitehead can perform better, earn himself a big contract, maybe somewhere else. Maybe you look at like comp pick formula. I like guys going into the last year of their contracts. I hate when you have to cut dudes to save cap space and not let their contracts run out because you're not getting the benefit of having the extra stuff. But I do think he's going to play extra hard this year, and I do think the being in the defense for the second year in a row is definitely going to help him. Elon says Davis and Hardy are key special teams guys. If we add another corner this week, maybe Anthony Brown or one of the defensive backs Dallas cuts. Yeah, I don't know where that goes as far as like I haven't looked at other teams' players and who they might be cutting. I think it's just going to be a bloodbath, and we're going to be like, oh, look at all these players that got cut. I don't know who's good, who's bad, I don't know who's good, who's bad. But 1,200 players are going to hit the open market, going to hit the waiver wire pretty soon. Cody Dog says, I think Yeboah has a shot. I do think from a special teams perspective, there's a shot he makes it on here. William asking, how's the new addition doing? Baby Wren is doing well. She's She doesn't do a whole lot. Just kind of, kid rips ass. she farts real loud. No, she's not bad. Lots of long nights, though. Did not get much sleep last night. Shay, on the other hand, sleeping great throughout the night. She's been doing a great job. Andy says, keep Bam, trade Michael Carter. How much is Michael Carter's trade value actually worth? I feel like his leadership in the locker room is more valuable than whatever we get in return for him. Steph says, Davis is staying. 3 safeties are what we will be working with. I do agree. I think Ashton Davis is hanging around. Daniel says, do you think we pick up another wide receiver sometime this year? Yeah, I think we're going to look closer to the trade deadline when there's a team that's like not performing well. Could it be Devontae Adams? Could it be, one of these other guys like a Marquise Brown over in Hollywood Brown, whatever, over in Arizona with their fire sale, throw a pick over to them, especially if someone goes down. Like if you lose one of your top 3 receivers, then I think you start making a move. Right now, I'm concerned, but not in panic mode. Elon says, question, do we carry 6 wide receivers or 4 tight ends? I think we will do one, but not the other. I would prefer to carry the 4 tight ends, I think, because I think some of the other players that are on this wide receiver room could sneak onto the practice squad, where Kuntz had such a high metrics coming out of college. I think someone's going to roll the dice on him, and that's a little scary. Seago, at the game last night, Bryce Hall did not look good. No, he does not look good. I don't think he's going to be here long, for the full season. I think he is going to get cut. Jason says, Tanzel Smart is 28. Let him play for another team. Well, that's why he goes to the practice squad. And then he'll have the opportunity to go through 31 other teams' waiver wires before making it to our practice squad. So if a team does want him, they'll have that opportunity. Has Smart been on the practice squad a couple of years? He has. I think he's been with us for 2. I have to look and see how long you can be on the practice squad. There used to be limitations to it, so I don't know if that's still a thing. GVH says, did like to see that Clemens didn't bite on the fake second time causing a quick throw. If he didn't bite that first play, the stadium would have exploded because he would have blown up the quarterback. Clemens is a violent dude. Omar, Ryan, thanks for the breakdown. And on a Sunday, Tim Boyle is the 3rd emergency quarterback, which does not count against the 53. It does count against the 53. It doesn't count against the active 51 day of roster. So if you're going to keep a 3rd quarterback, you are losing a roster spot of that 53. But active-wise, you could have 51 other players active along with a 3rd quarterback. So that's where the confusion kind of comes in. Stephen Angle says, happens all the time with 2 kids, total opposites. So, Ren's only 2.5 weeks old. She's got some time to grow into her personality there. But hopefully she doesn't keep us up too much later because I want to sleep. Especially my wife. Becca, you're a champ. Brian comes in. Brian says, and behind the scenes, Douglas working, starting to show. In my opinion, everything happening has his hands on it. By far the most impressive GM I've seen as a Jets fan over 40 years. Yeah, I said this when he first started drafting, even our first 2 drafts, as much as you can argue they did not work out because of Denzel Mims, because Mekhi Becton has been hurt, because we've traded Elijah Moore, because Zach Wilson, isn't the quarterback right now. There's a lot of shade thrown at Douglas, but when you look at the rest of his roster building, the job of the GM is to put together a good roster. That's through waiver wire pickups like John Franklin Myers, like Bryce Huff, Berrios for those few years we had him here. Those are the types of moves that are kind of hidden and under the radar. And I noticed those with Douglas over the course of the last few years. And I was like, I got his back. I trust Joe Douglas. And then last year he has the draft of all drafts for the New York Jets, and you get offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year, comeback player of the year in Breece Hall. You're going to get last year's draft was just studly. And this year's draft is looking pretty good too. I'm liking everything we're getting out of this. But this team absolutely has Joe Douglas and Robert Sala's fingerprints all over everything. They're picking up guys that are captains on their college teams. They're picking up guys that they can trust, guys that can wear the Jet logo proudly. There's not one player on this team, I think, maybe I'm overlooking someone. There's not one player on this team that I feel like, man, that guy's a shithead. Like Elijah Moore at one point, I was like, man, this guy, when we drafted Elijah Moore, I was a little, I wouldn't say irritated, but I was like, man, this is the old piss game guy, the guy that like caused his college team to get a penalty because he scored a touchdown and he was showboating, and then the kicker misses the extra point to tie the game. That was Elijah Moore's first impression of me when we drafted him. I would say that was the biggest character-ish concern, and it started to bubble up, and that's why he's no longer on the team. But it's impressive how the Jets have built everything around this roster. I feel like you could be proud of this. Oh, yeah. Common says Brandon Eccles getting suspended for dangerous conduct in a car crash. Yeah, Eccles. He'd probably be, of everyone on here, I think he's the one I would question the most from like a character perspective. And then I guess you kind of got to throw Dalvin Cook in there with some of the stuff he's got going on. Whatever. Not great. But overall, I do really like this this roster. Eddie says, not sure why Joe Douglas didn't go after Isaiah Simmons. Dude made the Giants D so much better. He's filthy. I don't know how much. I would love to see like a peel back behind the curtain. How many times do all the GMs in the league, how many times are they aware? Like, is there a big group chat like, hey guys, I got Isaiah Simmons looking for a trade, possibly looking to move him? Or is it just like two GMs that are kind of friendly, like, hey, you kind of need some help? Like, here, let me send that your way. It seems like it's more of a boys club than it is like an overall forum. Like, there's probably teams that don't like one another aside from just division rivalry things. Like, there's probably personalities between owners and GMs and stuff. RW says, what's the chances of Hardman getting cut? He's shown deep speed, but not deep hands. And hasn't that always been his problem? No, he's not getting cut. Not happening. He's impressive. I just don't think he's going to start. I think Cobb's going to end up starting because of the questionable, maybe injury history and questionable hands. Jason says, do you think Tippmann could replace one of the starting five without there being an injury sometime this season? Yes, I think he could replace either Connor McGovern at the bye week at center, so he has 2 weeks working with the starters, or maybe even Laken Tomlinson. If Laken Tomlinson is kind of like shaky and Tippmann has looked like pretty decent, I could see them slotting him in over there. Remember, Robert Saleh was a part of the Seahawks organization when they had Flynn on a big contract, and they wound up drafting Russell Wilson, who was on a dirt cheap contract, and they sat Flynn at quarterback in like for the rookie. So I do think they would do that. And then to the same extent, Joe Douglas was on staff in Philadelphia when they drafted Andre Dillard to replace Jason Peters. And they're like, hey, well, sorry, Dillard. Peters is better. He wound up playing for like 3 or 4 more years with Philadelphia before moving over to the Bears and the Cowboys. Duncan says, practice squad rules. Any number of players who have not accrued at least 9 games in a season, 4 players who have accrued no more than 2 seasons, 6 players with no experience rules. Oh, interesting. So I guess if you play enough games, you can't go down to the practice squad. And Tanzel Smart, I don't think has played enough games. He's played, I guess, games in season. Does he have to start? I don't really know how that goes. They said it during either Hard Knocks or One Jets Drive that he hasn't played in a ton of games. Omar says, to answer the question, are the Jets ready? My answer is yes. The O under all 3 quarterbacks looked as sharp as it's looked. Mekhi and AVT look like a strong side, huge gains in the run game coming. Yeah, imagine Breece Hall running behind Mekhi Becton. We never got to see it. Now this dude's going to be blowing dudes up. I can't wait. I can't wait. Did the season start yet? Is it here? Is it week 1? I can't wait to be in the stands. I just want it. Everaldo says, watching Aaron Rodgers, then Zach Wilson is like shooting an AR-15, then a water pistol. Yeah, Zach didn't have a great game yesterday. Didn't have a great game. D. Santana. Ryan, I was most impressed with the O-line. From expectation where we thought they were going to be to where they are now, I would agree. I would say the offensive line has impressed me more than I thought it was. Jason W. says, if a Jet is going to win Comeback Player of the Year, will it be Mekhi or Breece? I think Breece, because of the amount of yardage and the focal point he could be. Now, Mekhi Becton, after missing 2 years, could 100% be the guy if he makes it the entire season and he has like a Pro Bowl type season. He could be that. There's the outside, I shouldn't say outside, there's a real good chance neither one of them gets it. And it ends up being Damar Hamlin just for stepping foot on the field after everything that happened at the end of last season. But I would like to see, I mean, if you want to name the trophy after Damar Hamlin and then give it to someone else, that's maybe what I would prefer. But yeah, Mekhi would have a great claim to it on the Jets, but I think Breece would ultimately get it. Sneakers to Boots. What's up, dude? He says, Becton's got his mental game fortified. He will unlock this O-line potential. Yeah, the biggest part for Mekhi Becton, aside from the health, appeared to be like sort of his mentality, like you're kind of getting at here. And he definitely, there were times throughout the course of the last 2 seasons where I felt like, Mekhi Becton, you probably shouldn't have said that. Or maybe, why'd you send that tweet? But I think he's in a good spot now. This is the best we've seen Mekhi Becton look from like a happiness perspective since his rookie year. I mean, he obviously felt like he had earned the first team reps. He had never not been the starter for us. Like even when he got hurt last year, he was never the backup yet. It was just in practice. And obviously it wasn't looking like real great last year, but he was in practice, got hurt. He had never been a backup. So I do think he can absolutely unlock everything. I mean, heck, top 11 overall pick, you got to have this guy hit. Really want to see it. I would love nothing more than to have to pay Mekhi Becton a franchise tag or a big contract at the end of the season because he proved all the doubters wrong. Big bust. Back to a big ticket. Glenn says, do you think we should cut Zach Wilson or treat him? I would not cut Zach Wilson at all. That would be a very bad move. I would hold on to him. I think Zach Wilson could, look, you have him under contract for the next 2 years. Keep him as your backup for the next 2 years. If you like how he's developed behind the scenes, then maybe he's willing to take some type of backup contract next year and say like, hey, look, we want you here. We want you to be the heir apparent to Rodgers whenever that time comes. But we can't give you like low-end starter money. So if you're going to get that elsewhere, like you're going to get that elsewhere. But I think your best shot to have continued success is with the system that you've been in behind Rodgers, sit and wait a little bit. I think that's going to be the ultimate game plan for Zach Wilson. Lucas says, the Michael Carter hate is weird. Every defense loaded the box against the Jets for at least half of the season. Yeah, I don't look at Michael Carter's season last year and think like, oh, wow, he's really bad. That's not how it came. Like, that's not how I looked at it. I looked at it as like, okay, like you, they're loading the box because Zach Wilson couldn't prove to throw the ball, and we were down to like offensive tackle 6. So it's a combination of our offensive line and our inability to throw the ball that really shot Michael Carter in the foot, along with him being injured as well. So there was a little bit more going on to Michael Carter. I do like the person Michael Carter in the locker room as well. I think that leadership style is very much valuable from I always say each year there's like glue guys. Michael Carter is one of those glue guys. Like even if Bam Knight is the better running back than Carter, I would rather have Carter because of Dalvin Cook, because of Breece Hall, and because of Izzy Abanikanda. Doug asking, how do you feel about our game against Dallas? I think it's going to be a tough one. Our first 6 weeks of the season is going to be really tough. I mean, you go from Bills to Dallas, New England, KC, Denver, and then the Eagles. Those first 6 games is a gauntlet. If the Jets can come out of that 3-3, I'm going to be feeling pretty good. 4-2 would be feeling great. Like I think the Jets should beat the Bills. They should beat the Patriots. They should beat the Broncos. Those are the 3 I think are a lock. And then I think the Cowboys, it just kind of depends. Cowboys defense is no joke. Can our offensive line hold up against some of the pressure that's going to be coming for Aaron Rodgers there? I do trust our defense going against any other team's offense in the NFL. And that goes alongside with the Chiefs as well. Like I do think I'm not as concerned when it comes to can our defense hold up. It's the O-line that gives me the willies, and Dallas has a really good defensive line. Like Philadelphia, I think as far as teams in the NFL go, is our toughest matchup. Like if you had to say one team you don't want to face in the Super Bowl for the Jets, it's Philadelphia. And I would bet most teams probably don't want to play Philly because they see the roster. And they might get Jonathan Taylor. Like that's crazy. That would be absolutely nuts. Let's see. Let's hop back over here. Go through a few more questions. Phil Adams saying 400 people in the house, only 84 likes. Yeah, come on. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here and you're excited for the season, hit the like button if you think I've earned it. Jets Forever says 4 drops, 2 throwaways, miss down the seam. Everything else was money. I have to go back and watch Zach. I didn't do the every throw for him because I was so wrapped up in the Aaron Rodgers every throw. I liked what we got out of Zach. I was pretty happy. Omar says, Ryan, can't say it enough. This is a great breakdown and presentation. Thank you. I stayed up late when the baby's making noise at night. I'm like sitting on my computer, tapping away on like all the graphics and stuff. Kelvin asks, Carter Warren on the pup. I think it's possible. I don't know if I think he has to be on the roster to start. Otherwise, he's out for the whole season. I mean, maybe they do that. How about them Jets? Comes in. Thank you so much. I don't see Zach being a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. That's okay. I don't need top 10. We were saying last year, if we had just average quarterback play, we would have won the AFC East. And Zach Wilson, he's got the physical gifts to be a top 5 quarterback in the league. It's just, does he have everything between the ears, and can he actually see what's happening in front of him, or is he still going to get the happy feet when protection breaks down? He's going to make wrong decisions. But that is a question that I have no worry about pushing off to the future, because I'm going to enjoy Aaron Rodgers for as long as Aaron Rodgers is going to be here. And Zach, even just making little baby steps behind the scenes, makes me feel good. Eddie says, Michael Carter 1 is going to play a huge role in the short passing game this year, where Rodgers needs him when the line collapses to dump off to. It's going to be all our running backs. I think you're going to see a lot of screen passes. That's how you neutralize a nasty pass rush. Like when the Eagles start sending blitzers, little dinks and dunks. Just lob it right over the defensive lineman's head and let your running backs make room, make plays in space. So I don't think that's exclusively a Michael Carter thing. I think it's definitely going to be a full running back room thing. Duncan says, we definitely improved our first contact tackling. Still get worried about picking up the screen when we lose containment on the quarterback. Yeah, I would say that the tackling has looked a lot more solid. I'm excited to see Whitehead now that he is, not missing tackles quite as much. He had a few last year that went for big ones. I think Cincinnati was a long 65-yard touchdown. We had one against Philly in the preseason that I vividly remember of him just kind of laying a big boom but not wrapping up. The screens are always going to give me a concern, especially not having Quan. Quan kind of solidified the screen game for the New York Jets, and Ken Barnes and Sherwood and all those other guys, can they still play to that same sort of level, I guess? William says, I would rather see Taylor go to Philly than to Miami. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I see Taylor going to Miami. I think Philly makes a lot of sense because the head coach from Indianapolis came from Philadelphia. They just had joint practices together, so there's probably some conversation going on there. Philly to me seems like the place to be if I were Taylor. But then you got to figure out the money. Draft pick wise, I don't think it matters to him. Philly's got so many draft picks still. I think, unless they started swinging stuff around. Even with the A.J. Brown trade, I think they were still in good shape. Civil says, Zach is looking good, but I need to see him play a regular season game to ensure he has really improved. Let's hope we don't have to see him, though, and he can sit behind Rodgers. Yeah, my goal for Zach Wilson is not to see him for at least 3 years. I do not want to see him, or maybe last game of the season. Last game of the season, he comes in and he shellacks the Patriots. That's what I want to see. Behind the scenes, Zach performs well. Jets lock up a playoff spot where the final game of the season doesn't matter. We're in Foxborough. Zach comes in as just like, hey, we're going to rest Aaron Rodgers. And he just beats the ever-living piss out of the team that like made Darnold see ghosts. And Zach had one of the worst games I've ever seen from a starting quarterback last year. I very much want to see Zach kind of exercise those demons. Rico says, Rodgers carved them up for 3 touchdowns on just 20 passing attempts last year. I'm not worried about the Cowboys. I am against other teams. Yeah, I guess when he's got McCarthy, like a little juice to that sort of relationship, maybe he's a little more fired up and will play a little more zest. That's how I'm expecting the Sean Payton Denver game to go week 5. Sorless comes in and says, our D-line will break the sack record this season. I think it's going to be really close. So the sack record is 72 sacks over the course of a season, and Philadelphia had 70 sacks last year. The Jets, I think if you have 1 sack per quarter over the course of a season, I think that gets you to 68 sacks. So you're going to have a few games where you have 5-6 sacks to eclipse that mark. And obviously if you get one of those like 8 sack games or something along those lines, that helps too. But you got to average at least 1 sack per quarter plus 2. You got to get plus 2 over the course of the season. RW says, Zach put some passes in the tight spaces and had them dropped. He still has to learn how to lead the receivers more and will throw where they will be, not where they are. Yeah, that's going to come with time, I think. He has looked a lot better. I think now that you've got the feet kind of sorted out, like he's not doing the drop back, like a little bit, but not the way he was running around with Mike LaFleur back there. This has been a huge growth year for Zach. From Hackett and Rodgers, even Boyle, like everyone across the board has really been helping Zach out with that. Lemons says, it's not about what Jonathan Taylor wants. He has no control over who trades for him. Well, he doesn't have to sign a contract with whatever team trades for him. So, yes, he does not decide where he goes. So it would take a team saying, oh, we're going to trade for you and not give you a contract, and we're going to hope that you show up for your pretty low base. Like, I think his base salary is only like $1.8 million or $2 million. Like, it's not a whole lot this year. He wants a new contract because he's clearly outperformed what his rookie contract was. He's going into, it's not like he's playing on the franchise tag either. Like, if he's playing on the franchise tag, it'd be a lot more money that he'd be missing out on. Like, Jonathan Taylor, to me, could sit out. And it's not going to be like a huge detriment to him. I'd have to see what the exact rules are. Like, can you get fined more than what your contract currently is if you sit out? I don't think that's how that works. But you would want Jonathan Taylor to want to go wherever he goes because he's going to want to sign a contract. And if I were the Eagles, I would make the trade and push that cap hit later on into future years. Rico the Pup says, what's nuts is that the sack record was done back when it was only 14-game season. Those Bears defenses from the mid-'80s were all world. Yeah, that 85 Bears was filthy. Was the 85 or 84 Bears? I don't remember what year it was that they set that record. Yeah, 14 games is insane. Our passing record for the Jets, 4,012 yards or whatever it is. It's like just over 4,000 yards. Joe Namath, 14-game schedule. Like the fact that we have had an extra 2 games for 30 years or 40 years or whatever it's been, and the Jets haven't been able to sniff that, tells you just where we've been at the state of our quarterback play. Lemon's asking, doesn't Jonathan Taylor have 2 years remaining? He has 1 year this year plus a franchise tag next year. So, yes, kind of. Team control for 2 years. But this year is kind of the year, like, he doesn't really have to play. All right. So, I think we're going to finish that up there. Rounding it all back, I think... Are the Jets ready for week 1? Yes, I do think we're ready for week 1. We're going to go up against Buffalo. Josh Allen has trouble against the Jets anyway before we got Aaron Rodgers. Remember, we beat Buffalo. We were missing Corey Davis, AVT, Breece Hall, and Zach Wilson threw for 150 yards on a beautiful day. You're telling me you're going to have Aaron Rodgers under center with Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook lining up behind him. It's going to be an absolute bloodbath. confidence oozing out of every orifice. That's how Jet fans should be feeling right now. We got to prove it. Don't go into week 1 too high and mighty. Realize it's got to go through Buffalo, but I do feel confident. I think our boys can handle it, and I think they will handle it. I think we're going to shellac the Bills week 1. Boys and girls, I want to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. Do you think the Jets are ready for week 1? Let me know what you think about my final 53-man roster predictions. And as always, go Jets.
Jets!